Hello and welcome to 21st Century Football, a podcast that is all about celebrating the best of the world's most beautiful game, but only if it happened in the 21st century. This series is all about championing the greatest footballers of the last 20 years. Our regular panel of guests will chat about the players' careers, their honours and incredible stats. On today's show, we are talking about the Premier League's toughest midfielders. One of them at least. It's Roy Keane. I'm Will Brazier. And today we've got Adam Brown. Adam, how are you?
I'm good, Will. Are you?
Yeah, it's another Man United player. Is that all right?
It's fine. It's all right. I was distinct lack of City players so far, but you know what? We'll go with it. We'll go with it.
We will
Small
get there.
club.
Yeah, we might touch on City a bit later on.
Shut your mouth, Statman Dave.
I didn't say anything.
You did. I heard you.
It must have been the rafters or something knocking around.
I'm like an owl, mate. I'm on a swivel. I'll get you. And we'll kick off today's episode like we'll do every episode. I'll delve into the Wikipedia and we'll just, dissect this Wikipedia. We know Roy Keane inside and out, but did you know he was born on the 10th of August 1971 and he's an Irish footballer? He says he's an Irish football manager and a former professional player. Now, I think we've got a
Instagram star, Twitter sensation,
yeah,
pundit extraordinaire.
I was just thinking though, Dave, we've also got to factor that into this episode as well, haven't we, Adam? His managerial career.
Yeah, well, I suppose it's. I mean, that's definitely something we can look into and dissect because it's definitely an element of him, certainly in the last 20 years.
And the punditry as well.
Yeah, it's all goes to making the man who he's become, really.
Well, I'm going to be very strict today because this is 21st century football. So I know Dave's absolutely frothing at the mouth to talk about 99 Turin, but I will be banning that. He is the
greatest individual performance from a central midfielder in European Cup history.
Stop.
And we have to ban it because of time.
Stop it.
We have to ban it because of time.
He is the joint most successful Irish footballer of all time, having won 19 major trophies, 17 which came at Manchester United in his club career. He served as assistant manager to the Republic of Ireland team from 2013 to 2018, regarded as one of the best midfielders of his generation. In 2004, Keane was named by Pele in the FIFA 100 list of the world's greatest living players. Stop it, dissect it. Where'd you stand on that?
On the Pele thing?
Yeah.
I mean, I think El Hadji was on that list as well. So it genuinely was. I remember when that list got released. So I'm not going to use that as any kind of great marker, to big Keane up at all. I do think he should be on a list of greatest players, by the way, because he was phenomenal. Bit different to perhaps a lot of other players that we'll look at on this podcast, in the sense that he's never going to be a numbers guy. Do you know what I mean? That's not his game. But in terms of sheer, inspiration that he gave the teammates and influence that he had on people, unbelievable player.
Because normally when we sit down for these episodes, we get a top 10 goals or a top 10 bit of skills.
It's difficult, isn't it? Because you're not going to go, he scored 20 goals, that's it. It's more, with Keane, it's more what he brought to the team, and also, saying this as a Man City fan, what he brought to the club of Man United. Yeah. He's often people refer to him as being, the manager on the pitch almost, and an extension of that Ferguson mentality. He was just so, I think, we'll probably get into this a little bit more later on, but it was almost the fear that he instilled in people, as well as, that kind of made him inspirational, didn't it, really, to his teammates. But, yeah, what a player. In 2007, the Times placed him at number 11 in their list of 50 hardest footballers in history.
11th? Are they idiots?
Can you name 10 more quickly?
Absolutely not. No, he's number 1. Who in their right mind would think he's not? Would you give him the award? Would you say, well done, Roy, you are the 11th best or the 11th hardest footballer of all time?
I'll probably go Kenny Cunningham number 1, but that's just me.
You've not even thrown in big Duncan Ferguson. But Roy Keane could have Duncan Ferguson 1v1.
The list of hardest players and stuff, it's like, if they had some sort of UFC style tournament just to sort of see once and for all, but it's just based on who tackles the hardest normally, or who's got a short fuse. Keane's got to be up there though.
There's different types, isn't there? Like you said, there's short fuse, hardest. Like Duncan Ferguson to me, more scary.
Yeah, well, tall, got the range,
but
got the headbutt in him.
That's enough.
Glaswegian kiss.
I think Ferguson's had enough airtime there. His 18-year playing career, Keane played for both Nottingham Forest, Manchester United before ending his career at Celtic. Keane played at international level. I'm sure we'll get into that, as he was sent home in 2002 after a dispute with national coach Mick McCarthy over the team's training facilities. Dave, apart from the big crunching tackles, do people forget how influential he was?
I think so, yeah. I think we look at him in moments, and obviously we can't mention 99, but how influential he was in that semi-final was big.
We can't mention
but
that.
we kind of forget that the drive and the football at that point was very much 4-4-2.
Yeah.
Very much 4-4-2, two midfielders that would go both ways and would attack and would defend. And that encapsulated Roy Keane. You know, at the moment, football's a little bit different where you have players that have different characteristics that fit different styles. But Roy Keane, more of that energetic player that would break into the box, that would play something like next to a Paul Scholes, that would play next to a Nicky Butt. And it would take different roles in those sides, playing next to Paul Scholes, maybe being a little bit more defensively minded, allowing Scholes to get on the ball, get into the box. But as well, you know, we consider United's sort of performances in Europe after 99. You take the 2001, 2002, where they lost to Leverkusen in the semi-final. A great performance from Roy Keane, but didn't play in that first leg. Was that one of Ferguson's mistakes? Played in the second leg, they drew 1-1 away at Leverkusen, grabbed a great goal, breaking into the box. So what you kind of remember with Roy Keane, they're not the most beautiful goals in the in the world, but it is that kind of drive from midfield, little touch in the penalty area, good finish. And I think the thing that you get with Roy Keane in those moments is technically he's going to be good. You know, the standards that he set for Manchester United was so important that players were almost in fear of giving him the ball and not giving him the ball in the right pace, you know, with the right tempo on the pass. And I think that elevates the club. That elevates the standards. Obviously, Ferguson's standards were massively high, but on the pitch, if you gave Roy a bad pass, he's going to go for you. As much as he goes for the opposition, puts big challenges in, big tackles in. Again, 99, Edgar Davids, some great parts there. Obviously, we can't speak about that. But those type of tempo-setting tackles elevates the side, lifts the crowd, lifts his teammates. And that's the impact of Roy Keane, those types of moves.
Do you know, I think he was actually potentially technically quite underrated.
Very, very much underrated.
Because like Dave said there, you know, if he's got that kind of mentality of people are scared to make mistakes, he's got to make sure that what he's doing is perfect.
Yeah.
Do you know, if he's like saying to Paul Scholes and, you know, Giggs, Beckham, all the players that he played with, listen, don't hit me a bad pass, he can't then hit a bad pass because then he's like, well, you know, practice what you preach, mate. So for him to actually hold his own and be just as good technically as those other players in what is probably the best midfield that probably in Premier League history, let's be honest, of those four.
And in European Cup history, but can't mention it.
You know, but those four as a midfield four, for he's, you know, people often overlook his passing ability, or you know, they'll talk about Scholes as being the great passer, and Beckham had this great, you know, delivery. Giggs was great dribbling. You know,
and getting into a midfield with a team with Veron as well. You know, we mentioned all the great players that we remember, but Veron was a very good player.
But Keane was never the one that was going to drop out.
No,
ever. Like he was definitely first name on the team sheet. Really, wanted throughout the whole, you know, for years at United. You know, and you just look at the success that he kind of brought with him in terms of, like you say, elevating everyone. There's not many players around now who can do that.
You'd say Bruno Fernandes has had a similar impact of standards at Manchester United, where if...
What's in the elevation? In
terms of like doing things wrong, you know, making the wrong movement off the ball, putting the pass in the wrong area, you can see Bruno Fernandes gets wound up about that.
Got you.
But that's very much in the ilk of Roy Keane, that, like we sort of mentioned, the standards have got to be right. Like, if you're a centre-forward playing in front of Roy Keane and you miss a chance on goal, he's going to hammer you. So it makes you better as a player. You've got to achieve as well as Roy's got to achieve. And I think that is the impact on Manchester United and almost the change in culture that we're seeing with Bruno Fernandes. It's standards. And it's very difficult to get that. You know, we speak a lot about recruitment, how you sign players that score goals, that are fancy and do tricks. But having that kind of mentality is so important. And I feel that we lack that in some of these young players that are coming through that maybe want to be more technically gifted midfielders, that we haven't got that edge that we previously had.
But they also, the ones that are more like, you know, technically gifted, so to speak, they get a lot more of the limelight, and, you know, if they do something that's a little bit of, you know, a bit of trickery or a, you know, a great pass, a back heel, whatever, a feint, then they're going to get the attention. But, you know, I always think that Roy Keane just dictated games, the pace of games, and not necessarily through his passing, but just the way he would drive, you know, he would put the pressure on the opposition players, which means they couldn't get the ball away quick enough. And I've never seen a midfielder dictate. You know, if he played well, the chances are United are going to win the game. I always think with Keane, you know, and he very rarely had a bad game, very rarely. And he was the first to admit it. If he did, he kind of own up to it. But I think in terms of those midfield players that you see dictating games, it's very rare you get a player like that. But you look at those in, you know, 21st century, those teams that were successful, and you had like a Keane, a Vieira, Gerrard. They always came from midfield, and he, for United, you know, in arguably what is United's most successful era, he was the midfield talisman, if you will, you know, in terms of not the goal scoring, but dictating the game, you know, having that mentality that went through the whole team. It was irreplaceable.
Just on that goal scoring, got to sneak it in the 99-2000 season.
Right, okay,
yeah. So
when was the majority of the goals?
6 goals in 12 Champions League games. So he had impact from midfield. No, 6 goals in the Champions League is a good record for a goal scorer, for an Mbappe, for a striker. So considering that was from central midfield, something we've got to mention. And those dominant years, Roy Keane was at the heart of that.
Yeah.
Sneaked it in.
But you look as well as, in some of the players in the 21st century, in the last 20 years of football, players that have got ego, and you could argue that, Keane has got that in his own way. But, sometimes you get players and it's like, oh, well, he's not got the right manager. But you look at the managers that Keane had worked under. He'd had Brian Clough previously, then Fergie.
Can't mention that.
Oh, I don't know. Says him, Mr. 99 over here.
You know what you want, pal.
But do you know what I mean? To be trusted by managers of that level of success, for him to play in a team, and for those managers to go, listen, you're essentially my voice on the pitch. You've got to be a hell of a player.
Just one last thing on the ego. I don't think it's a detrimental ego. So it's not like an ego where it's like a positive ego, where it elevates versus kind of crushes confidence.
Yeah. It's not like, look at me, I'm amazing. It's almost like, look at me, try and emulate me.
This is the standards.
And raise your standards. Yeah.
And I'll throw in a ranked tackle for proceedings. Let's get into the stats. Keane is the most successful captain in Manchester United's history, with 9 honours in 8 years as skipper of the side. So where do we rank him in terms of Premier League greats?
In terms of central midfielders?
No.
In terms of overall?
Is he the greatest Premier League player of the 21st century?
Well, I don't think you can say that because of that we judge people on goals in terms of greatness.
Well,
I think we do.
About later.
Who's the greatest Premier League player of all time? Either Thierry Henry or Cristiano Ronaldo. Because they had impact in such big games. Because they scored goals. But I think in terms of central midfielders, Keane is 100% up there with Paul Scholes, with Frank Lampard, with Steven Gerrard, with Vieira.
If you're saying, United are the most successful team of the last 20 years, in terms of trophies that they've won, right?
Yeah.
In 21st century, United are probably going to be considered to be, the best team of that era.
Yeah.
And he was the captain for the majority of that.
Speaks for itself.
Yeah, he's got to be right up there for me. He's right, but again, I agree with what Dave says. He doesn't get the plaudits because people are obsessed with goals. You look at like a Lampard and people going about how great goal-scoring midfield player, but it's not all about that, is it?
No.
Because
he
needs passion.
He needs someone there and allow him to go and score the goals. So, Keane was very much almost the unsung hero of those United teams in a lot of ways, where because his consistency was so good and his levels were so good, it was never questioned. It was just like, oh, Roy Keane, of course he'll do it. He'll win the ball back. He'll inspire the team. So it was never like, oh, if Keane could have played well this week. It was just of course he was going to.
Before the episode started, we watched the video that you provided of some crunching tackles, which, we talk about maybe him being underrated, but maybe it's more sort of...
I think the era suited him. I think with VAR right now, Roy Keane is getting a few red cards more than he did get at Manchester United.
Well, yeah, we watched that video. What do you make of it? Because like you say, listen, how many of them tackles would go through now?
You got to play the card you dealt with, though, innit? So he was in that era. He could do it, and he did it well.
Do you think some people there's always that question, like, again, it's like a romanticising thing where people always say, oh, there's not enough Roy Keanes around these days in terms of players.
Oh yeah,
100%.
You couldn't have him.
Yeah, he wouldn't function now.
I think he'd function within a certain setup. Like you could see Roy Keane playing for Diego Simeone's Atletico Madrid, easy.
Yeah, but he would have to scale it back a bit.
I think he fits into a certain philosophy and style now, whereas before it was kind of, a little bit more of a not a less complicated game, but it was more like standard within teams played, one of 2 or 3 ways. Whereas now we're seeing a lot of philosophy, different philosophies and styles. Like, would Roy Keane play for Pep's Barcelona with Xavi, Iniesta and Busquets? Probably not. But would he play for a counter-attacking United in 2008? Probably yes.
But also, as well, is that the great thing about the last 21st century football is that you had these great midfield battles. You're never going to have another Keane Vieira. Like, think about midfield battles in the Premier League now.
Rodri versus Fabinho doesn't really get the same.
It's not got the same ring to it, has it? Do you know what I mean? Yeah, like
Dave's looking a bit murky, actually.
No, but do you know what I mean? It's not. It's not got the same fireworks, the same passion. It's you could argue that, if it's 20 years ago, maybe they could fly into the tackles a little bit more, but there was something about that era and particularly Keane, where you're looking for certain fixtures. I imagine Dave as a United fan, you're thinking, oh God, usually Arsenal, Liverpool coming up, you think, all right, Keane versus Gerrard, it's Keane versus Vieira, we're going to get something happening in this game. You're always going to get, there's going to be a talking point. That's for me is that, ultimately we're watching football to be entertained as well. And there was an element of that with Keane that that he wasn't out there. We could talk about great football players who entertain through their technical ability, the trickery. But with Keane, you think his passion, his desire to win, you're going to get some fireworks on the pitch just from that alone. So he had a great entertainment value as well, I think, Roy Keane.
But did he overstep the mark at all, David?
Not in the era. Now, 100%. We saw a few tackles in that video where he's basically kicking through the back of a player that would be a red card in this day. But it suited what the football was about. At that point, it was you had to win that midfield battle.
Yeah. Well, just on that, Dave, I believe you've got a quote that sort of sums this
man up.
This man up.
This hero for many Manchester United fans.
Your words,
excuse
not mine.
my French. I'd waited long enough. I'm f***ing hitting him hard. The ball was there, I think. Take that, you and don't ever stand over me sneering about fake injuries.
So that was about his tackle on Haaland. Whoa, stop what you're doing there. If you want to listen to the full podcast, click the link in the description down below and you can hear what we really think. Thank you for watching. Make sure you hit that like button, drop a subscribe and get in the comments down below. What would you rate this footballer out of 90? Would you take him for a pint? Probably not.